Today I want to take you
back to the past.
And by the past, I mean 2 or 3 years ago, a time when a certain subculture took over the internet. A subculture many would assume was an unstoppable force, but as soon as it seemed this subculture was on top of the world, things slowly but surely began crumbling in its path. I'm of course talking about cringe culture, an aspect of the internet many claim still plagues the internet to an extent, and let's be honest, it didn't really die and chances are that it won't anytime soon. But it has long since reached the point to where overexposure has led to a backlash amongst more contrarian individuals. This can of course be contributed to the actions and behaviors from fans of cringe compilations of yesteryear, but I'll get to that later. Back in early 2016, cringe culture was inescapable. You could have lived under a rock in a jungle in the middle of Papua New Guinea and still be unable to escape its grasp. One, because of cringe comps, the Jerry Springer of the internet, where people mash up a bunch of god-awful content that isn't theirs into one vapid bundle. And two, Leafy is here, a YouTuber who was on top of the world in 2016, but now, yeah, not so much. Cringe culture could be described as many things. Mean-spirited, tasteless, toxic, even cancerous. Some would say that cringe culture is cyberbullying, although that is highly debatable depending on what you are talking about. For instance, if a YouTuber with 1 million subs were to make a tasteless rant on some 13-year-old with 500 subs, I can understand why people would call that cyberbullying. On the other hand, an ordinary internet user calling out some weirdo for having a scat fetish can hardly be called cyberbullying, given that's the price you pay for being a weirdo on the internet.
The expansion of the butthole, watching the poop come out, smelling the poop, touching the poop, tasting the poop, masturbating on their penis with the poop.
The problem with cringe culture came more or less with its fans. Mostly young teenagers who compensated for their shortcomings by mocking anyone they deemed to be weird. Whether it be furries, anime fans, people with autism, or anyone who disagrees with their overly nihilistic worldview. That and it brought upon one of the most unfunny memes in recent times. The dreaded Bleach joke. Long gone were the days of precision timing and clever writing. All you needed to make the entire 6th grade class burst into laughter was to show them the Clorox logo, a fad that would momentarily be reborn this year with the Tide Pod Challenge. This leads to the ultimate hypocrisy in cringe culture. Its own inherent cringiness, to put it into other words. They seem to love mocking people for trying so hard to be edgy, when their whole shtick is to make unfunny jokes about killing themselves with cleaning products bought from the dollar store with tax return money. And not to brag or anything, but I was making jokes about drinking bleach as early as 2009. How's that for hipster credibility? Now, as stated before, cringe culture and cringe comps never really died. In fact, many cringe channels are raking in decent views. However, a lot of people are more vocal in stating how shitty cringe compilations are. In fact, for a short period in late 2016, I made a rant on a user known as Cringecore, a video I took down less than a day after uploading it in fear of the ensuing backlash. Since it's now 2018 and I'm free to trash talk cringe comps without fear of my like to dislike bar looking like a reverse lightsaber, let me voice my opinions on cringe compilations. They are trashy and lazy, what with little to none of the content presented in the videos belonging to the uploader. I'd say in some cases they were just as bad as the reaction videos of yesteryear. It's an easy way to get views without actually having to put in much effort into your content. And while I'd love to get the views of channels such as Sir Cringe, I'd rather keep my own integrity. Although I must say one thing. Cringe culture in retrospective wasn't the worst thing to come out of 2016's endless internet vapidness. There are way worse subcultures on the internet as we speak, some of which have actually gotten people killed. And while cringe compilations are still as vapid as they were in 2016, they aren't the worst thing on YouTube at the moment. Even if they are still pretty shitty. Cringe compilations aren't the only thing to be mentioned, as cringe culture arguably ruined a genre of YouTube videos I once took part in: DeviantArt rants. Many DeviantArt ranters threw away the idea of using crappy DeviantArt users as a fuel for comedy in favor of being the same bland cookie-cutter tripe as cringe compilations, but with a boring, unfunny narrator talking over it. The most notable example of this is Deviant Cringe, whose username has to be one of the laziest I've ever seen. His content is middle of the road at best and unfortunately has many traits that plague the DeviantArt ranting community: a seeming lack of a personality, a slight underproduced aspect to his videos, and an overabundance of fetish users being the subject of his rants. Many users have simply given up on DA rants, and I can't blame them when it's the same cringe culture pandering tripe we've seen time and time again. But alas, every genre must run its course, especially when cringe culture gets its hands on it. Cringe culture has faded to a point. Not to the point to where it's dead, but to the point where you will have people pointing out how vapid it is. The only question is if it will last into the ensuing decade ahead of us. Leafy clones sure as hell won't because they already died last year, but cringe comps do still rake in decent views every now and then. Although whether they do so by 2020 is questionable. The internet is an ever-changing platform. Many fads come and go, only to last a couple of years before biting the dust. And only time will tell if the current cringe culture of the internet will last.